Hi, my name is Erica from KryptoSeoul. I'll do Korean and English at the same time. So thanks for coming. It's been a very short notice, but there's been many conferences in Korea in September and October, so it's been pretty crazy. But I'm really happy to have someone really meaningful in Seoul, and he decided to drop by Seoul before going to Singapore. So thank you for coming. And you know, everyone probably knows who this is. This is David Chaum. He's the founder of DigiCash, but he's had quite a career in cryptography and in blockchain as well. So I'm really excited to have him here. 다들 아시겠지만 이분은 디지캐시의 창립자인 데이비드 차움이고 지난 4월에 디코노미 컨퍼런스 때 오셨던 분이잖아요. He gave a keynote speech in the economy, the conference in April. So I'm sure many of you recognize him from that as well, right? So thanks for coming back. And so 오늘은 he's going to have a presentation on bringing blockchain to the mainstream, and it's going to be a very informative and insightful talk. So please give a big round of applause for David Chaum.
Well, thanks. It's super fun to be here, and yeah, thanks for your kindness. Yeah, I'd like to. Well, there's a lot of things we could discuss, and perhaps afterwards, maybe I can make a small presentation, and then we can have some question and answer. But if you want to interrupt me, you know, feel free. So, I mean, this is my thesis, really, these days. And I think just in the last weeks, it's become, unfortunately, increasingly obvious that in order for the blockchain to, let's say, reach its potential, it's going to have to go mainstream. And that requires solution to a number of technical issues, which I'll touch on. Now, I mean, I don't think I have to explain to South Koreans how powerful it can be if, like, a very large segment of the society shows their support for something. I'm thinking about the candlelight revolution, and you know, someone who's also worked on various democracy technologies. I mean, this was a really, you know, moving to me, thrilling to see something like that happen. And so I think that one could extrapolate from that to look at the blockchain, you know, space. There have been some, there's a lot of, we say, equivocation, you know, changing the mind of regulators, and there's been hesitance, delays in establishing suitable regulatory frameworks and so forth. And, you know, probably if there were more people using it more enthusiastically, there would be less hesitation and more clear acceptance of these types of mechanisms. I guess that sort of goes without saying. Well, the converse is probably also true, isn't it? Like, suppose we see a contraction in interest in this space because of fluctuations in price, for instance. Well, that could cause a, sorry for using uncommon words, a diminution, a reduction in the progress in allowing these kinds of mechanisms to be used by people. So it would seem to me it's kind of in all of our interest to take the blockchain mainstream as expeditiously, as quickly, you know, as we can, And that's basically what I'm going to be trying to address here. And I'll show you some, like what I think would be the killer app, so to speak, what I think would be a technology, because I'm a technology person, that could really enable this to happen. And I won't show you how such a technology could work, but I will show you at least a pretty clear-cut definition of what I think it needs to be able to do, and I'll try to argue why that's necessary and maybe like sufficient. And I'll leave it to you to judge whether you think such a technology could be possible. But first, it's very dramatic. Okay. Try it one more time here. Okay, this was working really nicely before. This is on. Laser pointer's working. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, maybe I, like the water filter thing. Up.
This goes up. Next page is this.
Oh, that's back. Yeah. Oh, okay. I'm so silly. Excuse me. I'm learning how to use all this high-tech stuff. So, yeah. So let's roll back the clock for a minute and look, in the archives, and just to remind you, there are people who weren't alive during these, or weren't, paying attention to this stuff when I was doing some of these things, and I feel like I should remind people about this. So actually in 1981, actually in 1979, I published as a technical report, and then 81, I guess, the paper appeared. And there were, more than 5,000 references to it. Just pretty, I think it was a lot. 5,300 I read. I don't know, that's a lot. And that was the basic idea of mixing. And this is from Wikipedia. How many people remember how mixing works? Uh-oh. Well, there's a, yes, of course. Professor Kim remembers because he was at Crypto back in those days. Well, mixing works by multiply encrypting. Every person who wants to send a message multiply encrypts their message using the public keys of each of the series of nodes. So this is what's sometimes nowadays called a multi-party computation, which is a term that I coined once. So this is a distributed system, right? Each node has its own key, and the messages are passed through each node successively, and the nodes, the red key is a private key which allows the node to remove the red encryption, the public key encryption layer, and then you have only the blue and the yellow layers left, and this first node then outputs these in a permuted order, a randomly chosen order, so that once you keep repeating this process and the payload messages, which would typically be end-to-end encrypted, once those come out the end, even no one knows the linking between these outputs and these inputs. So no one knows where this message ended up. Was it this? Did it come out here, 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 or here? So even if you were to let's say, compromise 2 out of those 3 nodes, you still wouldn't know where the message comes out. Because each node, you know, injects its own permutation, which is independently and uniformly distributed, if you want to use the big words. But, right, it's it's as simple as kind of shuffling a deck of cards. You pass it to the next person around the table, they shuffle it, and so on. And so long as at least one of the shuffles was honest and secret, and no one can like see the, you know, read the cards from the backs, then the shuffle is unknown to all the participants. So this was probably the first distributed protocol ever proposed. Yeah, mixing. And it does a really nice thing. Now, it's funny, some people have mentioned, I didn't plan to go on and on about this at length, but since no one even seems to know what it is, I might as well tell you that back in the day, there were certain people that didn't like this idea. They didn't want this. They wanted to be absolutely sure that the government could see exactly who was talking to whom. And these were very serious, well-funded people, and they had a lot of people who sort of worked for them, but it wasn't obvious, and so they got it written into the very fundamental defining documents for the internet that you could never do this. You cannot encrypt the headers of messages. It's forbidden from the internet. It's one of the IETF RFCs. Yeah, right there in the third paragraph it says, absolutely not, cannot do that. I mean, there's nothing like that anywhere else in the whole internet specification. So why would they care? Well, the truth is that people who want to spy on other people know and have known forever that this is the handiest way to spy on people. Just find out who's talking to who and when. So I'll tell you another story. Back in this time when I was working on this, I heard that the U.S. government decided that the CIA should have to reveal one of its secret things that it did, so that the government could check that at least they did that one correctly, but the rest of all their secret stuff would remain secret. So Congress insisted that one thing would become public, and the Congress could investigate it. So they chose when the U.S. government decided to depose the democratically elected president of Chile. I don't know if you know this. So as a graduate student at Berkeley, I went to the library, Doe Library, the main research library, and they had there in those days the complete congressional record, because it was one of the archive sites. This was all paper-based. This is way before the internet. So I read about how did the U.S. government take over Chile. Well, they did it by tapping into the phone central of the Chilean government and just recording who called who and when, and sending that information back to Washington. In those days, there wasn't a big enough uplink to send all, they couldn't tap all the phones or anything, but that would have been too much work to listen to all that. What do they speak in Chile? Portuguese or Spanish or something? Spanish. So, yeah, that would have been too expensive, but they just got the traffic data, let's call it traffic analysis, and then you could easily see who calls who before what, who calls who after. You could find out everything about how the government works, so then they could just go in and just kill a minimum number of people and take over the country. Yeah. So if you're into that kind of thing, it's, that's really great. So if you want to protect privacy, for like a democracy or something like that, then you might think that it'd be pretty neat to just to build a little bit of mixing into the routers in the network, in packet switch network. It's almost free, but we don't have it. So okay. Anyways, that's a little bit more than you ever want to hear about mixing, I guess. Other questions about that? Does it make some sense? Do you see how fundamental this is? This was the whole thing. Remember Edward Snowden and the metadata? That's the same thing, right? Knowing who talks to who and when. That's metadata. That's why we had all that controversy. I'm not endorsing, I'm not taking a position on what happened. I'm just saying that's why it was so much interest in it. So what in the intelligence world has forever been called traffic analysis data was rebranded by our President Obama as metadata. That's a euphemism for knowing who talks to who and when. And in many countries, it's not illegal to capture this kind of data. It's not considered spying on people somehow. And back in the day, for instance, a little more historical background, we have things called pen registers, where this was done for manual, for old manual phone systems. Governments could request such pen register recording of all the calls that some phone number made and received. Also, what they is officially called a mail cover, that you could request, any government agency could request a mail cover on any citizen in the United States legally, and just find out the postman had to write down every person that wrote to that, sent mail to that mailbox, and every letter, both the sending and receiving address on every envelope that ever appeared in that mailbox. That's mail cover, yeah.
So you said a 100 group,
Well, it's like meetups in Seoul. There's lots of different interlocking groups, and it's kind of hard to really put your finger on exactly. Pardon me? Well, I meant, yeah, the person you can see, if you go back and look at the IETF RFC, then you can see who the authors were. Then you can see what companies they worked for, and then go and look at where those companies got all their money, and it'll be like overwhelmingly obvious. Yeah, but I mean, if you don't care about privacy, then this is kind of not that interesting. If you do, this is the low-hanging fruit, traffic analysis. So when I was a graduate student at Berkeley, I thought, this is the first thing we got to fix, and I came up with this protocol. And since then, a lot of people have been very interested in this and trying to, there's a conference every year about it, roughly speaking, and there's thousands of papers. And, a funny thing happened to me. I'll tell you another story, as long as I have you all here, because there was a guy who came to me and said, David, I invented mixed networks too. And that was years after I invented them. And then he was so disappointed when he found that they were already published, and I felt really sorry for him, but he was a friend of mine until he died at a young age, unfortunately, due to kind of natural causes, unexpectedly. But that kind of thing has happened to me before in my career. As a scientist, that gives you a funny feeling. First, you bond with that person, and the other thing is, you think, wait a minute, maybe the stuff that I'm so proud of thinking of, someone else could have easily thought of it. And so I once came around the corner at a conference and heard some people saying, oh, that mixing, it's so simple, so obvious, Honestly, it really happened to me. I remember who was saying that. And, like what we say in the United States, sometimes you see billboards that says, watch this space, right? That means, maybe there's going to be another shoe to drop on this mixing. Maybe someone will, after 35 years, find a fundamental improvement to it. and it won't be those people who said it was also obvious and simple. Okay, yeah, maybe it's someone right here in.
One of the arguments from the government is that the Tor or Mixnet should be used by bad people. I mean, right now,
Sure.
Zcash has been used by
Yeah.
for multiple, bad purposes.
Right.
And you know, I was.
I'm sorry. You're right. We have to be careful. Yeah.
Right. And,
Yeah.
there is, I mean, because if there is trapdoor, the government may own the trapdoor.
Yeah, this is a really rich area, you know, and there's a lot of it's not quite that simple, and I thank you for pointing this out. You know, I'll tell you that I was at the crypto conference where Professor Kim and I met, you know, 15 years ago, 20, whenever, a long time ago, when he was a mere graduate student, and imagine that, and just a few weeks ago, and there was a whole day devoted to this question: should the government have the right to look at these, you know, find out who's talking to who and what they're saying? And it was the most amazing day I've spent there in the field. I mean, basically, there were many people who argued very strongly that we as scientists should not even be willing to discuss the question of whether this was a good idea or not. We shouldn't even be having that one-day session on these things, because we really just shouldn't even, you know, work on it or think about it or talk about it. It was quite surprising. And then there were a lot of people there from the government, and you know, I'm not going to go too deep into this, but I will tell you that it is my fundamental belief that privacy of communication and of funding are essential for democracy. And, you know, democracy can thrive in a sort of benign environment, but sometimes when the going gets rough, you may need stronger protections for democracy. So that's a whole. Okay, that's about as far as I can go on this without stirring up too much. Are there any more questions on this? How many people? Yeah. Pardon me? Funding, yeah. Well, well, it's important that you can send money to people who write articles, do research on, or do, you know, whatever. Who you know, you have to have the right to support people who are that you know believe in, without someone coming and saying, "Oh, you supported them," or like right now, you cannot send money to Julian Assange, right? It's blocked. Well, that's not, you know, it's not ideal from a democracy point of view. So, yeah, I would just say the mechanisms that can provide the proper infrastructure for democracy, you know, we shouldn't just ignore them because maybe we don't feel we need them right now. Maybe we will need them at some point. That's my view. We should celebrate these things. We should take it as an intellectual challenge to try to find ways to protect democracy if it should ever need to be protected. Okay. And to that end, I created the International Association for Cryptologic Research, and I did that. Here's a related interesting thing. You can read about it. Follow the links on my website. Science Magazine reported that the head of our government security agency in the United States had written letters to the IEEE and other scientific organizations, threatening them with draconian, you know, horrible unbelievable legal consequences if they even had sessions on cryptography, let alone whole conferences. This is a fact. You can read it. So at that time, as a graduate student at Berkeley, I thought to myself, cryptography, that was very early days. Maybe, that's the only effective mechanism we have to create structures in cyberspace. Well, no one was talking about cyberspace back then, but I was thinking about it. This is really fundamental stuff. So would it be a good idea to not explore how we could build a digital world? I didn't think so. So I, used the university resources to typeset an invitation, and I mailed it, and so on, and created. We had this conference, and I announced it was an international organization, and so then it became impossible to stop research in the field. And so that was, I did that because I thought this kind of stuff is important, and yeah. And I also did this other thing I just want to point out that, by the way, I have to say here, I open sourced this. Back in those days, I also filed patents on different things. I patented things in those days because I had a lot of ideas. That's one of my big problems. I have a lot of ideas, too many ideas. So anyways, but this I open sourced. I did not patent it. I published everything about it. And people started, I encouraged people to write the software. There were many iterations of it. And that's a longer story. And I would submit to you that it wasn't a happy tale. I think that it's been ultimately, I open sourcing the first distributed, system. It didn't really turn out that well. I think I'm on the record as having said that Tor is a honeypot. And I think that anyone who, pardon me? It's dangerous to say it. Yeah, Tor is a honeypot. As I've said it, I think I said it in print because, if you do a system like this and these messages are all of different lengths and they come at different times and they can route through different routes, then it defeats the whole point of it. It's easy to link the inputs to the outputs. That's what Tor does. So many people think, oh, I'll use Tor because I don't want the government to know what I'm doing. And that's just making the government's job easier. Because I just look at all the Tor people. That's where those are the people that are, I was coming into Korea this morning, and I noticed that the lady who decided whether your bag should be searched or not, she kind of looked at me as I was walking in, and I realized I just expected not to have to deal with her, just walk past her. And she just let me walk past, but she made eye contact with me. I felt like if I was like the people right in front of me, they felt like, well, maybe they were worried that they were going to be searched, and sure enough, she sent them off in that direction. So I think anyway, so enough about that. And the RIPE project was an effort to create a totally open source, totally transparent verification of cryptographic algorithms. And this is the only one that really took place in the whole history of cryptography. All the other ones have been run by government. This was an interesting thing about this one. I got the European Union to fund this for 5 years. It wasn't easy, and some of the cryptography that we developed is used by Bitcoin today. So whoever Satoshi was, he wasn't about to use, or whoever the group was, they weren't about to use cryptography, which was created by government. They wanted something that really had an open source origin. Okay, so now we're coming to this later phase, the 90s, and you see, in the 90s, it wasn't really possible for people to run nodes and do all the computing that needs to be done like it is now for the blockchain. But it was possible, and I showed how to do it, to allow a small computer like a smartphone, a simple smartphone, to protect your privacy while leaving all the heavy lifting to companies and government. This was my idea. And in fact, that little computer, which I called a card computer, which looks just like a smartphone, could protect your privacy in some sense unconditionally. And that's what I showed in this article that appeared in Scientific American. It was also invited to and appeared in some of the best journals of computer science in various languages, including English, German, and I think Japanese. I'm not sure about Korean. And it was a pretty big breakthrough. And if you go and look on my website, there's the 10,000. This is a 3,500 word version that's heavily edited by the Scientific American. The 10,000 word version that I wrote myself, there are some pretty powerful sections of that still ring true, especially like, you might like to read through it sometime if you're interested. So this is pre-blockchain, right? This is saying, well, we can't run all the computers and everything, but we can protect our own data and our own privacy and let the banks and companies run the computers. It's a surprising thing. You can do it. And that article shows you how to do it and explains it. And so in order to kind of try to give these ideas a chance to be used in the world, I decided to launch a company to push the ideas forward. And I chose what I would call the low-hanging fruit, the most attractive application that most people would care the most about. What was that? Money, right? Yeah, just like Satoshi. That was the first, that was the obvious thing to use to try to get these ideas out. So I formed this company, and in the mid-90s, we did an airdrop. Yeah, that was an airdrop. You think this is a new invention of people who weren't, born yet when I did this? No, we gave away cyberbucks. We created a currency. It was capped. It was, highly secure and privacy protecting, better than Bitcoin, because it's privacy protected based on blind signatures. I'm not going to explain to you, but here, because I don't have a slide for it, but you can read about it in this article, for example. And these were, each digital coin was represented by a digital signature separately, and those were obtained by a blind signature process so that the bank wouldn't know which coins you withdrew. So when they were spent, the bank has no information about which account they were withdrawn from. So in other words, even if they had infinite quantum computing and whatever, they would still have no clue. We say it's statistical or information theoretically privacy protecting. And in fact, the whole suite of protocols which I showed there were of that nature. So they're not based on cryptographic assumptions. They were information theoretic. It's a much stronger domain. And then we also, I licensed Deutsche Bank to issue. In those days, this was before the euro, right? These were Deutschmarks. So they issued fiat-backed cryptocurrency using our software, Deutsche Bank, which was the largest bank in Europe at the time. And if you think it was easy for me to go and talk to a German bank, which was the largest bank in the world at that time, and meet with their directors in the boardroom and their lawyers and their information, it's a lot easier just to write a blockchain and get some people to use it, I'll tell you. And then we got Australian dollars and U.S. dollars. The other banks issued other, fiat-backed currency. So I took this really pretty far before the dot-com bubble burst. So if you go to my website, chaum.com, you can, what is it called? Hover over, mouse over these logos, and you'll see from the web archives some of the shops, home pages, and see what the kind of weird things they were selling for cyberbucks back then. Okay, that's enough of the archives. So now I'm going to share with you some, I think, relatively deep insight. And how many of you ever heard someone say, it's either something you know or something you have or something about you? Have you ever heard that? This is what security guys say. All these guys that used to work for the FBI and now work for banks or something. This is part of their wisdom. Those are the three ways that a person can authenticate themselves, identify themselves to an organization. And I haven't researched it, but probably you could find some quotes about that. So this is the current paradigm, right? I've come in here, from China. I had to give all 10 fingerprints, and I don't know, they've taken pictures of me and every other, God knows what they were doing. So this is the way the world is set up now, right? It is required of us as good citizens to prove always who we are and prove our identity, and these are the mechanisms that are available to do that, right? Yeah, well this, back in the day in Berkeley when I was a grad student, this didn't seem like a great idea, I'll tell you that. But so what I wanted to show you here is a way to turn that totally on its head, totally turn it around in the blockchain space, right? So what I'm trying to say is, this is kind of a segue into the actual statement. And to give you a clue, I'm trying to say that you should have your own keys that give you control over all of your digital life. That maybe, I don't know, that could be even a human right, right? The right to create your own keys and keep them, to give you control over your digital life. Does that make sense? That's kind of related to the blockchain ethos, isn't it? It's part of the thrill. So let me try to spell that out a little more explicitly and clearly. So let's take them one at a time. Something you know. Well, that's like who you talk to, what you say when you communicate over social, with messaging, over the phone, and so on. All your relationships with companies, the confidential information aspects of that, right? That's something you know, and you should be able to have ownership over that data by virtue of keys that you created, which are necessary in order to access that data. It's a pretty radical idea. I can't believe I'm standing here in Korea talking about this, but because I hear everything's going so great around here that no one's so worried about anything like this. But you never know. Then the next thing, digital money. Remember, eCash was the first digital bearer instrument, right? In effect, I invented the idea that a number could be worth money. And I received tremendous attention in the media about that back in the DigiCash days. Okay, and that's my idea. And I showed a superior form and deployed it, both unpermissioned and permissioned, if you will, both fiat and airdrop, right? But there are other kinds of assets now that people are looking to securitize or whatever with tokens, and you're all familiar with a lot of those, and that's very exciting, right? So whatever you can own through a token, you know, you should own the keys that are the only way to establish ownership of that token, right? That seems natural. Yeah, that's what the blockchain is about. So, and then there's also things about who you are. So that's like what's called in that Scientific American article credential information. That's information about yourself, like reputation, points, degrees, you know, the fact that you have insurance, that you're a good citizen, that you pay your bills, all that kind of stuff. So that's information about yourself. Also, medical data, right? That's information about you. So all that data, you should have the exclusive control over access to it through keys that you created and that no one else has a right to have. That's a pretty radical manifesto, isn't it? But let me, Professor Kim, let me just say, I mean, doesn't this sound sort of like the logical extension of the blockchain? Is this where the blockchain is going? Yeah, right? Pretty radical.
So
Professor
I
Kim.
was gonna ask,
Please, yeah, no, please.
I mean, so I usually think of this kind of thing, but from the government point of view,
Yeah.
they want to like tax you, right? They
Tax
want
you, yeah.
You to pay tax. Right?
Yeah, yeah.
To you know, to compute your tax, they need to know your basically assets. So
Right.
you're saying that
Well, most countries don't have asset taxes. Rich people control the world. The only country I know of that has actual asset tax is the Netherlands, and that's only 0.5% or something. It's very easy to get out of. I mean, if you look at asset taxes, they've been diminished dramatically in the U.S. Inheritance taxes, I think, do we still have any?
so if
They've made it into a, well, yeah, we have it, but it's really easy to get around it, yeah.
So what you're saying is if it is sales tax, we can control because it's only.
I was going to ask you a sarcastic question, but I appreciate you keeping me honest because you're bringing up important issues. I mean, none of this stuff's completely clear and obvious, but would you say then that a taxation system is an incentivization system that the government is providing for the blockchain? I don't know. That's an interesting. That's an open question. That's an interesting question. Is that what taxation is? Would that, in a world like this, would that be what it would be? I don't know. Is it an incentivization scheme? I'm not sure. Anyways, okay. I thought I'd share these, radical, logical extension of blockchain with you all. As a public service, and just because it's pretty interesting to think about. So now I'm going to try to wrap up here by giving you the specification for what I think, if it could exist, would take the blockchain mainstream. Okay, to take it so that it could be used by all, a large swath of the consumer population, and that would sort of lock in the success of the whole blockchain ethos. Okay, so I think I think that payment and messaging are inextricably intertwined. You know, you can send a message by encoding it in an amount of payment, right? And you cannot send a payment without sending a message that includes the payment. So payments and messaging are very intimately related. If we're going to, you know, think of it this way, there's already an expectation on the part of consumers about how fast smartphone apps can do messaging and payments. It's like 10 seconds or less, right? I think of that as a, you know, user experience, touch point, surface that you cannot push back against. You have to accept that. That's not going to go away. People aren't going to want to use a slower payment system or slower text messaging. So that's part of the requirement. That's an immutable requirement. Well, suppose we could do that. Then what we would need is, you know, a lot of people would start using this, right? Blockchain payments, great. But then we'll have to be able to scale to like hundreds of thousands of transactions a second. Have you heard of a blockchain that could really do that with 10-second finality? I'm afraid that's the sad thing about the, you know, the blockchain community. A lot of people have been talking for years about sharding and about, you know, lightning and all this stuff, but they can't do that. So there's, you know, even permissioned chains that have trouble meeting those kind of performance requirements. Okay, but here's the next requirement. What about privacy? Would you like all of your payments to be completely transparent on the blockchain forever? Wait a minute, who was it that told me that Koreans don't care about privacy? So someone told me earlier at this museum. No, I mean, no one wants, that's ridiculous, right? Who would want that? So that's part of the requirement. Now, how strong does that privacy protection need to be? Does it need to be secure against a national adversary, a quantum computer, or could we just live with, you know, plain old industrial strength guarantees or insurance or something? I don't know. But I will tell you this, it seems to me that the public, at least in the US and in other places where, you know, they haven't been on a economic joyride, they are going to want more, and they have shown that they have less and less trust in many of the institutions of society. They want stronger protections. Americans, you know, they want it's only going to get you know, stronger, the desire for more effective and transparent, secure protections of privacy. It's not going to go the other way. So maybe a minimum level is sufficient today in some places, but it's only going to move towards more and more. And so I think a system that has strong guarantees is going to attract, of course, a lot of people. Look at the messaging space, right? For instance, I mean, with all due respect to the Asian markets that we have in the U.S., pretty clear trend. So, you know, so there's two kinds of privacy issues in payments and messaging, and most people don't have any clarity about these, and that's why I've listed them here separately. And I'll just like to try to, you know, describe them explicitly. There's the question of, is your IP address linked to a particular transaction? Or your phone, you know, every phone has a MAC address hardwired into it, right? Except iPhones, they have whatever. They also have they have a single MAC address they actually use. but on the network, right? So there's the question: is your physical IP or MAC address tied to linked to the transaction? That's the A. And then the other question is B: are transactions linked to other transactions? Those are two aspects, two dimensions of privacy in messaging and payments. And I've never seen it like pointed out clearly, but maybe I didn't, I guess look carefully enough. It's probably somewhere, but most people don't seem to keep this in mind. And most of the things that people seem to be about privacy often only address one or the other. And there's another aspect, there's another dimension to this, which is more of a qualitative dimension, or I say quantitative. That's what we call the anonymity set. How many people have heard of that technical term, anonymity set? Only Professor Kim and myself. Oh, and one more person. Maybe, yes, good. So anonymity set, that is the fancy way of saying how many people are you anonymous among, right? It's, is it enough that no one knows that you're one, whether you're which one of 5 drug dealers you are? Anyone ever analyzed the Monero protocols? Yeah, no, that's interesting. So, some privacy schemes don't have very large anonymity sets. What you want is to be anonymous among, like, all users, ideally. That would be a goal, right? You don't want you to be anonymous among 3 people. Yes?
It's Amanda. I think we're getting close to question time. I just want people to be able to answer questions. I'm sorry.
To ask questions or answer them? Can I just cover my last bullet point, Amanda, and then I will be done.
No, I'm sorry. I was trying to be stealth. I wasn't very stealth. Sorry.
No, it's fine. I mean, thank you for, I put a lot of effort in over 35 years into all this stuff, and I'm, no one has, like, assassinated me yet for saying these things, so I guess it's safe enough. I'm getting older. I might as well just say what I really think, right? So the final thing is that if you're going to build a consumer payment system in particular, you have to really be careful not to base it on any kind of weak or questionable or unproven cryptographic assumption. You may not have noticed it, but the kind of so-called hard problems, strong cryptography, that's used by many, many blockchain schemes and other systems, it's not the stuff that's been around the longest, it's new stuff that has, that's not really received the kind of analysis. It's faster, probably weaker. Why would you think that a newer, faster kind of encryption would be stronger than an older, slower kind of encryption? So if you build a global payment system out of a kind of encryption that a national adversary can selectively break, then you've created national vulnerabilities. In times of war, countries routinely try to destroy the consumer payment systems of their enemies. It's very well known. It's well documented. They airdrop counterfeit currency. Why? Because it harms civilian populations. It creates chaos. They can't buy food. They can't buy fuel. I mean, it's a very horrible thing to do to a society. So, if we have to be careful. If we build a global payment system based on the blockchain that, enables all kinds of great things, and it turns out it can cause systemic collapse, then we probably shouldn't have done it in the first place. So the requirement, and this makes all this other stuff much harder to do, right? It should probably be like quantum resistant. Or it should be very, very strong. Should not be subject to what government people sometimes refer to as rapid, unanticipated modes of attack. Right? Should be like something really, really good. Okay, I think that's my last. Oh, so those are the 4 requirements. If we could meet those, we could take the blockchain to be like the candlelight revolution. We could make it be a mass thing, and it would receive no resistance from government, and it would create a massive platform on which all kinds of distributed apps could flourish, and everybody and their brother could be creating their own dApps, and it's, you know, it could lead to just an explosion in creativity and use of information technology to enrich people's lives, and in all kinds of ways. It's even hard to imagine turning information technology loose. So this would be a way to make that happen. If we could do this, then that would be the infrastructure from which we would expect blockchain to create a whole new world. So I want to just thank you very much for your attention. Thank you. And now I will take questions if there's time. And I reserve the right not to answer, or to answer even rudely. But you were first, yes.
Where do you get the number 100K?
Oh, well, you know, you can read about in the blockchain literature. There's tons of debate about this now, and I looked into it a little bit. You know, Visa International published, and you can see they have a PDF on their website where they say that their system can do 60,000 transactions a second, has that capacity. But, you know, I know, because I used to hang with the CEO of Visa, for example, and the people who created the Visa network, and analysts and so on, and the first data people. So transaction processing systems like that have to have a peak capacity that's about 10x the average throughput. And Visa has, they say, 2 fully redundant data centers. So I think what they're saying is that they have 30,000 peak capacity per data center, and that their average transaction rate is about 2,500, 3,500 transactions per second. That's my read of it. But if you look further, you'll find people have done research every year. There's reports published, and they say that right now we're at about 500 billion electronic payments per year globally. So that's like, well, I think that roughly amounts to 1 per person per week. So a lot of different ways you could do this, but 100,000 would be like what I'd expect maybe in a year. But then if you could meet these requirements, but then in a couple years, you'd probably want to be closer to 1 million in transaction capacity. And it's not quantum proof, and it doesn't have a shred of privacy whatsoever at all, right? And it's not a messaging system, so I don't think it meets the requirements. So listen, you could think of this as a grand challenge. I mean, if we could do that, sounds very, very difficult. If we could do that, that can just catapult blockchain into a whole new reality, and it may need that catapulting, or it may not, but in any case, it'd be like extremely exciting if someone could do that. But I think those are the real requirements. Yeah, no one can come close to them today. Yeah. I'm sorry. Please, you were next. Yeah.
I was wondering, do you think there is a future for all these privacy-preserving coins? You mentioned Monero earlier.
Oh, Monero and Zcash, yeah, Dash.
There's a pressure from regulators, for example, in Japan, to drop those off exchanges.
Yeah, there's a lot of different regulatory pressures against these, or the so-called mixers is a different way without having, the Supreme Court of the United States said that that money was speech. And so, you know, freedom of speech should mean freedom of money. I don't know. It's a hard, you know, there's a lot of other ways to move illicit funds or illicit assets. That's what, you know, I remember from back in the day, you know, criminals organizations, they pay people in groceries, they buy and sell real estate. I don't know. I'm not sure that it's a completely effective way to stop criminal use of payments or criminal activity. I mean, so far I guess it's not really working because I don't think I think most people think organized crime is a thing, and it was a thing before Zcash and Monero, and I think it's still a thing, I guess. I mean, I don't know, and I don't want to know, but yeah, I think that's, yeah. So, but if there was a candlelight revolution that said people have the right to own their own information and control access to it, that would probably be a corollary to it. You can't, in fact, here's an interesting thing. You can't really control information about yourself unless it's private. That's kind of why I got on this whole privacy thing in the first place back in the day. In order for you to control access to and use of information about yourself, you have to keep that information private. Otherwise, you don't know what people are doing with it. So it's not a simple matter. It's, you know, I postulated the need for informational rights, and it seems very natural. And I think as, you know, digital stuff becomes more and more important, we're going to have to decide whether people have informational rights or not. And I'm not sure that you can slice and dice that too finely. Maybe you just have to decide one way or another. And I think, you know, blockchain is hopefully sensitizing people to the idea that they should be able to control at least their own money. And then, and identity too is a big thing. So I'm, yeah.
And like what you used to brought up identity too. Have you seen any interesting projects or developments in this space?
Well, there's a ton of stuff. Yeah, a ton of interest in identity. And if you go back and read that Scientific American article, you'll see the whole section in there about what I call credentials, and that's all about you know, getting all, so basically, if you have control over the information about yourself, you can maintain the database of information about yourself. And when someone else, an organization or a government, wants to query that database, they send the query to you, and you can prove that you're answering correctly. That's what I showed how to do in that article without revealing any additional information. So that's a pretty, it's totally different, like turns the whole question of data protection on its head, inside out. Actually, the way to do data protection is to let you have your own data and give you the ability to prove answers to questions about your data. And that's what I showed how to do way back then. Yeah, I guess I'm... Oh, I thought you were going to tell me to sit up, shut up, and sit down. No.
No, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'm very stealth. Sorry.
No, that's all right.
Not very private. I know for us, this whole journey has been really interesting. We've been traveling to different parts of the world. We were in London at the World Blockchain Forum, and then we were in Shanghai, and now we're here, and then we'll be in Singapore and Hong Kong, and maybe another place after that. So
In Asia.
for us, it's really important to understand different communities around the world, and that's why we're on this journey, is to learn from you all and learn how we can to collaborate and support your growth as well. And we'd really love to engage with you all, and South Korea is a special place for all three of us. So if there's any way that we can continue the conversation beyond tonight and really get to know you all better. I know this is just an introduction, but I know it's something David's very passionate about. Is community.
Yes, absolutely, thanks. Yeah, I mean, that's the whole point of the blockchain, is that it empowers, I was saying earlier, but maybe it was slightly too oblique, let sort of 1,000 flowers bloom. Let every person that wants to, contribute to create a DApp or to propose new kinds of things, or to rally and support different initiatives, or and all that. That's the thing that's super exciting. That's so back when I was writing about this stuff back in the 90s, it was kind of dry, it was sort of me and the banks, and now it's the thing that's unprecedented and has just unimaginably powerful potential is that computing will be distributed to the point where everyone can really participate. So you're not just like a user, you're part of the ecosystem. So these like meetups are kind of they're the first stage of that. These communities are, the thing that can drive the future, and that they will be the future. There's no real reason that information technology has to be centralized anymore. This is something I've never said publicly. It just occurred to me from these kind of community events that, 20 years ago, computers were big, expensive machines that had whole rooms devoted to them, and it was a centralized technology, inherently. It was like a coal power generation station or something. You can't, it couldn't be decentralized. That would make no sense, but it was impossible. Now, exactly the opposite is true. We have plenty of computing power. That's just not the problem these days. And so there's just no reason for it to be centralized. And so now we're just starting to explore what that would mean. And, it's a profound thing. Back in quite a long time ago, the PC was revolutionary. People who worked in big companies would get a PC, and they maintained part of the data of that company on their own PC, and that was revolutionary because they weren't allowing the central part of the company to control their data, right? This was, maybe the very early beginnings of blockchain. But now we're talking about, we're not talking about people within companies. We're talking about everybody having the ability to interoperate with all their data in all these systems. That's unprecedented, right now everything's locked up in different gizmos and different apps and different companies and all different APIs and this, that, and the other. It's not, you don't have access to it, you don't have control over it, there's no real way to to really, mash it and mix it up and whatever, and you're, and you don't have control over it. So if that changes, it can unleash human potential. Here's another interesting thing. There's a book. I'm not going to say it's the best book I've ever read, but it's the only book on the subject, and it's written by a friend of mine. It's actually really interesting. It talks about the beginning of computing in the Bay Area, and two different groups that were pushing computing forward. They had two different philosophies. It's the same. It hasn't changed. Go back and read it. It's called What the Dormouse Said by John Markoff. It's available in paperback. You'll see that one group thought that computers would unleash human potential. The other group thought computers would be really great to make artificial intelligence for weapon systems, or something like that. Maybe I'm slightly exaggerating about the second group. I don't know what they were thinking, but it wasn't, they were against the human potential thing. I'm in favor of it. I think that blockchain can unleash human potential, and information technology is like, it's like a whole new cerebellum, for society. I mean, this is you know, I mean, there's billions of people on the planet. Can you imagine if we could unlock the creativity and the of all people to like participate in a new informational world as like equals or principles? That's a profound thing. And then I will say, I know Professor Kim is anxious to point out things, but you know, there's a countervailing thing today, just like there was back then, right? There are people who think, well, no, we'll just get the AI more and more powerful so that it makes our lives easier, and that'll be it. We can just, you know, and then the AIs will be, you know, rewriting history and telling us, you know, the stuff like what we learned from our parents, right? And, you know, that's a very different future. So I guess that gets at the heart of decentralized versus centralized. Maybe that's why we're all here, because that's somehow the intuitive feeling that decentralized might be a more promising avenue. I'm sorry if you didn't think you would get into this kind of discussion when you signed up to come here. I'm sorry if I dragged you into this. I would be happy just to, you know, next time if you just want me to talk about, you know, comparing some blockchains or something, I would do that too. Yes?
So I have
Professor Kim. Sure.
quick question.
Okay.
The first question is just yes/no question. So
Wow.
next week, are you going to present something that satisfies?
No comment.
Okay. Good. So that was my first question. The second question is, for all the blockchain protocols I've seen, none of them are actually robust to BGP level attackers.
Mm-hmm.
Do you, I mean, shouldn't you consider, because, like, for example, China using, you know, Chinese Great Firewall,
Yeah.
they can control the traffic on and off, right? And, you know, BGP is inherently insecure. Then you can control the way the traffic is going around. Then if someone can control the BGP, then actually they might actually
Fork the break, yeah. Okay, about the second question, I mean, let me continue to be completely frank with you all, okay? I'll just tell you what I really think, and that is, I think that the blockchain community is being, in some sense, driven over a cliff, and we may lose this opportunity because there are too many people that place too much emphasis on the mechanics of, say, consensus algorithms. I don't believe that there is a consensus algorithm which can withstand the determined attack of a nation state. I think if you believe that, you know, you've been reading too much science fiction when you were growing up or something. That doesn't make sense. And certainly the kind of blockchain that I'm talking about here at a consumer scale can never exist if the nation state's against it. You can forget it. So the idea that, you know, I don't know who the exact adversary is in all this, but it's a misplaced emphasis. The real question, and the only question, in my opinion, about blockchain is, can we find a way to take the technology mainstream? Because only by doing that will we have the candlelight revolution of blockchain, and will it then be like a thing that you know that the government likes and backs, and this will create a fantastic new world. And so that's what we should be going for. And so, yeah, if people want to have endless debates about, you know, self-serving this or that or whatever, or be wary of that. What's the real question? The real question is, can we take the blockchain mainstream? That's the only question. That's the real question. And, you know, that's what we should all be focused on. And you know, So with that, I would like to end this formal segment, and I'm going to happy to talk to you one-on-one and drink water, eat cookies, and things like that. But I want to tell you, it was a great pleasure. Not that many people spoke, but I feel like I'm in communication with you because people are sending me nonverbal signals, and so I feel like it's been a really rewarding, interesting experience for me to be here, and I want to thank each and every one of you for being here and listening and giving me some feedback. So yeah, thanks again.
지금 시간이 좀 있으니까요. 그래서 네트워킹 좀 하시고 좀 궁금하신 거 있으시면 편하게 물어보시면 될 것 같습니다. So if you have any questions to David, please feel free to ask him during the networking session. So it'll be open until about 9:30. So please enjoy. Thank you. 감사합니다.